She had been saying no for 4 years, which was longer than she had intended when she started, though she had not intended anything in particular. The first no had simply been the truth. The first no had been honest. William had been dead for 8 months when the spring social came around in 1878, and she was 37 years old and still in the particular rawness of the first year of grief, which is the year when everything requires more energy than it used to, and some things require energy you don't have yet. Daniel Marsh had crossed the room and asked her to dance with the specific courtesy of a man who knows the answer is probably no and is asking because the asking matters regardless of the answer. She had said no thank you, and he had said of course. And he had nodded and stepped back and had not danced with anyone else that evening, which she had noticed without knowing why she had noticed. The 2nd April she had said no because the 1st April had established a pattern and the pattern had a comfort to it. She had told herself she was not ready, which was partially true. She had also told herself that Daniel Marsh asked to be kind, which she was not entirely sure was true but which was a more manageable reason than the alternative. She had said no thank you, and he had said of course, and he had not danced with anyone else, and she had gone home with Cora and had thought about it for 3 days before putting it away. The 3rd April she had said no because in the 2nd year she had noticed something she had not intended to notice, which was that she noticed when Daniel Marsh walked into a room. Not obviously, she was careful about it, but in the way that you notice something you have been trying not to be aware of, which meant that the noticing had been happening for a while before she caught herself doing it. The noticing felt like the kind of thing that needed to be managed, and the management required maintaining the no, because saying yes while she was noticing would have been a different thing from saying yes before she noticed, and she was not sure she was ready for the different thing. The 4th April she had said no because she had been saying no for 3 years, and yes would have been a different word with a completely different weight, and she was not ready for that weight, and she knew, somewhere she didn't look directly, that she wasn't sure she was going to be ready, which was the most honest reason of all, and the one she was least able to say. She had gone home after the 4th April and sat at her kitchen table for a long time and thought about it, and had concluded that she was in fact being a coward, which was not a word she used about herself often, and which she found uncomfortable enough to put away and not look at again until the green dress came out of the trunk for the 5th April, and she stood at her mirror and understood that she had put the dress on for a reason she was still not going to say out loud. She was not sure she was ready for it now. She put the last pin in her hair and looked at herself in the mirror of her boarding house room, which showed her a 42-year-old woman in a dark green silk dress that she had not worn since before William died, and that still fit exactly, which she had known when she put it on and had decided not to comment on. She had been going to the spring social every April for 5 years. She had been saying she went because she liked dancing, which was true, and because Cora would come for her if she didn't go, which was also true. And she had not been examining the other reasons with any particular rigor. William had died in the spring of 1877, which was 5 years ago this April, which was a fact she was aware of in the way that she was aware of most things she had filed carefully. He had been a good man, methodical and kind, and easier to love than most people found it to find things wrong with, which was its own kind of gift. He had died of pneumonia in March in the fast and undignified way that pneumonia takes people when it decides to, and she had spent the first year after in the specific work of understanding that a life organized around 2 people had to be reorganized around 1, which was more work than she had anticipated, and which she had done correctly and without asking for help from anyone who didn't offer it first. She had gotten her footing. She had been for 4 years a woman with her footing, which was more than adequate, and which she had been careful not to push against, because pushing against adequate was how you ended up wanting things you had decided you were not going to need. She had liked her footing. She had been on most days genuinely satisfied with it. Then April would come around, and Daniel Marsh would cross the room, and she would say no, and she would go home and sit at her kitchen table and know that the footing was fine, and that the part of her that said no to Daniel Marsh every April was not the part that was fine. Daniel Marsh had been in the county for 12 years. He ran a cattle operation on the South Road, solid and well managed, the kind of operation that reflected 12 years of knowing what you were doing and doing it without drama. He was the kind of man who was present in a community without requiring the community to acknowledge his presence. He showed up to what needed showing up to, helped with what needed helping, did not make himself the subject of any conversation he could reasonably avoid. The county respected him. The county also noticed, with the particular attention that small communities pay to things that happen consistently, that he had asked Rose Aldgate to dance every April for 4 years and had been told no and had said of course, and had sat down and not danced with anyone else, which was the kind of patience that communities file away in the category of things that have a shape. The spring social was in the Harmon Creek Town Hall, which was a building that spent most of the year as the county meeting room and 4 nights a year as something else. A Christmas time gathering, the harvest supper, the spring social, and the 4th of July, which was the exception that was held outdoors. The town hall had good floors for dancing, which was its primary qualification, and this April it had the usual collection of lanterns strung along the rafters and a fiddle player named Bess who had been playing frontier dances for 20 years and who played the same 30 songs in varying order and never seemed to run out of reasons to play them. Rose arrived with Cora at 7, which was when these things started, and the hall was filling with the particular noise of a frontier social, children running, men finding somewhere to put their hats, women finding the punch bowl, the fiddle tuning in the corner. She looked for Daniel Marsh, which she would have told anyone she was not doing, and found him across the room talking to the Hendersons, which was where he usually was when he arrived. He looked up when she came in. He always did. She looked away, which she also always did. This had been the pattern for 4 years, and she had found it comfortable. And she expected this 5th April to follow the same pattern, the looking up, the looking away, the first set of dances, and then at some point in the middle of the evening Daniel crossing the room to where she was and asking with the same quiet courtesy and her saying no with the same quiet refusal, and the rest of the evening the same as the previous 4. He did not cross the room at the first set. He crossed the room to the far end where Bess Harper was sitting. Bess Harper, who was 63 years old and the grandmother of 7 and had not danced at a social in 10 years due to a knee that disagreed with the activity. He asked her with the same courteous directness he brought to most things, and she looked delighted and alarmed in roughly equal measure and then delighted. And they danced, slowly, with him adjusting his height and his pace with the consideration of someone who has thought about what the other person requires, and Bess Harper danced at the spring social for the first time in a decade, and the room noticed and thought well of it. Then he asked Margaret Conroy, who was 19 and at her first social and had spent the first 2 hours standing at the wall with the practiced invisibility of someone who is afraid of being asked and more afraid of not being asked. She said yes in the startled way of someone who had not expected to be asked, and she danced. And by the end of the dance she was no longer practicing invisibility. Then Mildred Fitch, 70, who used a cane and who he did not dance with so much as accompany on a slow circuit of the floor with the fiddle playing something easy, and who laughed in the way of someone who had been brought back to something they had missed. Then Sarah Connolly, 21, recently moved to the county and not yet certain of her place in the social geography of the room. Then Helen Patterson, who had been widowed 2 months ago and who looked, during the 3 minutes of a slow waltz, like a woman who had remembered that she was still in the world. Then Cora. Rose had been watching all of this. She had been telling herself she was observing the room generally, which was the story she was prepared to maintain. But when Daniel crossed to where Cora was standing and asked Cora to dance, something in Rose shifted in a way that had nothing to do with general observation. She watched Cora say yes, and Cora's expression said she knew exactly what she was doing when she said yes, which was being the person who said yes so that Rose could feel something about it. Daniel danced with Cora correctly and pleasantly and said something that made Cora laugh, and when the dance was over Cora came back to the punch table with the expression she used when she was being strategic, and Rose said, "Don't," and Cora said, "What?" and handed her a cup of punch. Rose realized at some point in this sequence that she had been watching Daniel Marsh for the better part of 2 hours, and that she had not looked away when he looked up from his conversations, because he had not looked up at her. He had not looked at her once all evening. He was present in the room the way he was always present, unhurried, filling the space his size entitled him to, apparently unconcerned with what she was doing, which was watching him and trying to figure out when he was going to ask her so she could say no. Cora came back from the dance with an expression that Rose recognized as the expression Cora used when she was in possession of information that she was rationing. Rose said, "Don't." Cora said, "What?" Rose said, "Whatever you're about to say, don't." Cora said, "I'm not going to say anything." She handed Rose a cup of punch and did not say anything, which was worse. The evening moved toward its last hour. The fiddle was playing slower now, the songs for the end of the night. Daniel had danced with 9 women. Rose had danced with her brother-in-law, who had come with his wife, and with old Mr. Fitch, who was married to the Mildred he'd walked around the floor, and with the schoolteacher's husband who had asked because the schoolteacher was dancing with someone else. She had not refused anyone. She had not been asked by the person she had been, she now understood, watching all evening. She was at the punch table when he came to her at the end of the evening. The room noticed before she did. She became aware of the shift in the room's attention before she saw him moving, which was how she had always been aware of Daniel Marsh in a room, peripherally and then suddenly fully. He crossed the dance floor without hurrying. The room watched. Rooms like this always watch, which was one of the reasons she had been saying no for 4 years, because yes would happen in front of everyone and everyone would understand what yes meant, and she had been managing what yes would mean for 4 years by keeping it as no. She had thought, on some of the longer evenings of the past year, about what yes would actually mean. She had thought about it the way you think about things you have decided not to do, carefully, in the abstract, with a certain distance. It would mean that Daniel Marsh was not a courtesy or a kindness or a pattern she was maintaining. It would mean that she had been standing at the edge of something for 4 years that she had been pretending was nothing, and that pretending it was nothing was the choice she had made, and that choosing differently would mean the previous 4 years of choosing had been a kind of dishonesty she had been calling caution. He stood in front of her. He was not performing anything. He was simply there, the same way he had been simply there for 4 Aprils. The patient, unhurried presence of a large, quiet man who had made a decision and was standing in it. He said, "Rose," she said, "Daniel." A pause. He said, "Why have you been saying no for 4 years?" She had been ready for the asking to dance. She had not been ready for this. She said, "I thought." She stopped. She said, "I thought you were asking to be kind." He said, "That's not why I've been asking." She said, "I thought you felt sorry for the widow." He said, "Rose." She said, "Yes." He said, "I have never once felt sorry for you." He said it the way he said things, directly, as a fact. "I've been asking because I want to dance with you. I've wanted to dance with you for 5 years, counting the year before William died when I knew I wasn't going to ask." She was quiet. She said, "Then why did you keep asking after 4 refusals?" He said, "Because you never told me to stop." She said, "I said no." He said, "That's not the same as stop." She said, "What made you do this tonight?" He held out his hand. He said, "Because I wanted you to see what you were saying no to. Not me specifically. What you were saying no to." She looked at his hand. His large, rough hand, extended at the end of a long evening of dances, finally offered to her. She looked at him. She said, "Why did you wait until last?" He said, "Because that's what you are to me. The last one I was going to ask. The one where the answer mattered." She said, "That's a great deal to say in front of the whole room." He said, "I know." He said, "I've been waiting 4 years to say it. The room has been waiting 4 years to hear it." The room had indeed been waiting. The entire social history of Harmon Creek was holding its breath in the amber lantern light of the town hall. She looked at his hand. She looked at the room. She looked at Daniel Marsh, who had been asking her the same question for 4 years and had just changed the question in a way that made everything different, and she took his hand. The fiddler played. The room exhaled. Cora was crying, which she would vigorously deny to anyone who mentioned it for the rest of her life. They danced the last song, and then the fiddler played it again, and they danced it again, and then he played it a 3rd time, and nobody told him to stop. When the music finally ended and the lantern started to go down and people began collecting their coats and their children, Rose and Daniel were still in the middle of the floor, not quite ready to stop being where they were. Outside, in the April night, with the Wyoming wind off the prairie and the town hall going dark behind them, with the last of the social dispersing into the cold street and the fiddle player already gone and the lanterns being put out one by one, she said, "I've been saying no because I was afraid." He said, "I know." She said, "How did you know?" He said, "Because the way you said no had something in it that wasn't about me. It was about what yes would cost you." She said, "What did you think it would cost me?" He said, "Whatever you were protecting." She said, "What do you think I was protecting?" He was quiet for a moment. He said, "I thought at first you were protecting William. Then I thought you were protecting yourself from what comes after protecting William." She said, "You thought a lot about it." He said, "I had 4 Aprils." She said, "What made you try the different approach this year?" He said, "I realized I had been asking in a way that let you say no too easily. You could say no to me specifically. I wanted to make it harder." She said, "Dancing with everyone else was supposed to make it harder to say no?" He said, "I wanted you to say no to what you were watching, not just to me." A pause. She said, "That was a terrible thing to do." He said, "It worked." She said, "That makes it worse." He said, "Does it?" She looked at the last lantern going out through the hall's window. She said, "Ask me again." He said, "There's no music." She said, "I don't need music." He said, "Rose." She said, "Yes." The word sat between them in the April cold for a moment, both of them present in it. He said, "That's what I've been waiting for." She said, "I know." She said, "I've been waiting for you to do something I couldn't say no to." He said, "I was never going to stop asking." She said, "I know that too." She said, "I think I always knew." He said, "Then what were you waiting for?" She thought about it with the honesty she had been working up to all evening. She said, "To be sure." He said, "Are you sure?" She said, "I've been sure since the 3rd April." He said, 3 years. She said, "I needed to catch up with myself." He said, 3 years is a long time to catch up." She said, "I know, I'm sorry." He said, "I'm not angry." She said, "Why not?" He said, "Because you're here." She said, "Yes." She said, "I'm here." The last lantern in the hall went out. The Wyoming April night was cold and wide and full of stars in the way of high plains spring nights, which are cleaner than the nights of any other season. They stood in it, and neither of them was in a hurry to be somewhere else, and neither of them was in a hurry to name what they were standing in, because the name could come later, when there was time, and right now there was only the April night and the beginning of the thing they had been standing at the edge of for 4 years and had finally stepped into, and that was enough. That was considerably more than enough. The town hall was dark behind them. The street was quiet. The stars were numerous and specific and entirely unconcerned with the business of 2 people who had finally gotten to the right word at the end of a long evening, which was, yes.